Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to some more Warpforge content. And today I really want to get into a deck and a war boss that I took a crack at last patch and really felt like it fell flat, and that I just could not find the configuration that made this deck tick. And it was some conversations with BJ, the Ecclesiarch, and just kind of some of my own observations about where the meta is at. And again, just a shout out, BJ again did really great meta report. Mentioned that in my other Tau video too. And so if you don't know, essentially the top decks right now, uh, in my mind, BJ talked about them. I'm sure other people are kind of feeling the same way. Is that Turvagon combo is a real deck. It's probably either tier 1 or tier 1.5. I actually have not played against it all that much, even though I kind of designed this deck with that in mind. And we are going to look at a Turvagon matchup in the video just to be able to see how the deck plays. And I just love the playback feature because I can actually really think and talk about the games. So we are going to look at how that goes. Turvagon is definitely there. I think it's a pretty great option right now. And I actually picked up one of the overwhelming storms in my campaign recently and made one as a wild card because I do want to try the deck, and it's kind of like a fun, different type of green horde strategy, and definitely one that I would say is hands down more powerful. So we've got Turvagon as, like, definitely one of the more uh, new decks to tier 1 1.5. We've got Gazcol. I think we're calling it Fatigue now, because some people have their own feelings about Mill and what that looks like. Anyway, I will say I rattled off a quick like 10-0 the other day playing that deck. To me, I might actually put Gazcol Fatigue as like the deck to beat. I also played a bunch of mirrors, which is also how we arrive at our war boss today, which is Gordrang. And I might even change this name, but I think Gore Tempo is kind of what I was thinking. Essentially, had conversations with BJ Ecclesiarch. Had already kind of been talking. I think he'd even mentioned it on his channel before that like Gordrang has a decent matchup, if not a better matchup, into Gaskell, because he can be the aggressor in the control matchups, right? So he can actually put pressure out. You can sort of like put your opponent close to lethal, so that if you do need to Will of Gork, then you get to hit them for 4 or 5 with Makari or with uh, what is it, Dead Killy, or why am I blanking on the name right now? Not Change Deck. Um, Proper Killy, Dead Killy, whatever kind of Killy you need. Um, you can just put up a lot of damage. Might as well leave the deck list up while we're talking about it now. So the theory is that because the meta is very kind of slow and very centered around these kind of control or later game strategies, because I will say, just to give a little bit of an update, I think Uriel is okay, but he's certainly not tier 1 anymore. And the fact that orcs have the only board wipe in the game that can really affect Turvagon's strategy, immediately I was drawn to, like, this is probably an orc patch because they have a lot of good ways to abuse Tyranids. Even the Swarmlord matchup, if you see that, I'm not so sure as Gordrang. I would say as Gazcol for sure. You can just abuse your ranged advantage into them. And again, you've got these unconditional removal spells that match up perfectly into Tyranids. And obviously Will of Gork as a board wipe, but specifically no mucking about, which is really good for stealth units and these big units that they're trying to set up and hit you with next turn. And you can't target them, but you can set up no mucking about for the most part to get through. So it just feels like because Tyranids have gotten stronger, orcs have gotten stronger in a way. And I think that Gaskell Control or Gaskell Fatigue was kind of coming into the patch as the deck to beat. I still feel like that's kind of the dynamic. So um, my recommendation aside from this deck is kind of like beat them or join them. So either try decks like this with the control meta in mind and try to beat them, or you might have to join them, because I do think that Uriel and Madrail, who have been kind of the tempo warlords at basically tier 1 for quite a bit now, have been knocked down, pretty noticeably. I think Madrail may actually even be a better pick than Uriel, but I think even having played the matchup quite a bit, even with Gordrang into Madrail, which can feel kind of miserable, I think that I've kind of found a build that feels more succinct for not only addressing control, but again, being able to beat down, but also just play some of the most powerful cards in the game, which happen to be in the Orc faction. So we'll see what next patch brings. I think there are going to be some adjustments to Orcs, if I had to guess, based on their win rate. Tyranids, I think, are in a good and fair place for the most part. You can come at me in the comments if you really feel like that's not a great statement, but I think Swarmlord is a little bit more competitive. I think Turvagon is a lot more competitive than he used to be. I unfortunately don't have the Terra Vardengast, although I really would like to try that out a bit more this patch. We'll see if I can get there with the Forge. I think that Tyranids are probably in a much healthier place. Orcs are probably just positioned well against them. And then everything else just kind of is falling short right now, aside from Chaos. Chaos is still hanging in. I think Buggy's still number 2. I still think that build is super viable, and I definitely want to try it at some point. But I would say the two kind of boogie men of the format are Turvagon and Gaskull. So why are we playing Gordrang, right? Gordrang has an ability that gives it, a clear pathway to be aggressive, to be able to smack the Warlord when they're not developing, and when control decks or combo decks are kind of trying to get their pieces together, so to speak. What's better than just kind of like outvaluing them, out-tempoing them, and still having enough card advantage and enough power to close out the game? And that's how we arrive at Gordrang. And I've tried a lot of different builds. I do think that there are a couple flex spots, and we'll talk about it. And hopefully it won't drag out too much, because we are going to go over a game just to kind of show what I would say was more of an optimal game, but does kind of showcase the power of the deck, especially into Turvagon, if that's what you've been running into. I'll maybe do even more features on kind of where I end up with this, maybe by the end of the season. But let me know if you've been playing Gordrang, if it's been working for you, if it hasn't. But it's definitely had, closer to a 60% win rate when I felt like I was literally going 50-50 last season with it, or probably even less. So Makari obviously has always been one of the best, if not the best, legendary cards for the Orcs. It is so incredibly strong in this deck. I'm sure our win rate gets bumped by easily 5% when this thing is in our opening hand. The feeling that you get going turn 1, use your ability, turn 2, play Makari, use your ability. So it's like, I hit you for 4, I hit you for 5. You're concussed both turns when you're on the play. It just feels like you are operating on like an illegal spectrum of power. So pretty much, and you'll see in this game, like, you're going to hard mulligan for Makari. There's really not many cards you want in your starting hand anyway. A lot of them can be kind of responsive, or like you can play on curve if they're playing too slow. So I'm never like looking for that many cards, but I am looking for Makari, and that's something you should keep in mind. Proper Killy probably needs no explaining, particularly with a Warlord that can deal 10 to 12 damage easily with Proper Killy and his ephemeral chopper ability. It's just a great way to close out the game. It's also a great way in the Gaskull matchup to just get ahead on life, right? So maybe before they've deployed their armor from the Scarboy, or just you've got kind of like a low tempo turn from them, and you just smack them for like anywhere from 8 to 12 damage, depending on if they have armor or not. It's going to help you stay in the game so that when it does get to fatiguing, you're way up on life. And you can get some really crazy wins with it as well. I mean, your opponent has to respect this at 10 to 12 life, like in the matchup always. So I think it's very worth it. Now, I played around a lot with the 3-drop slot. I was trying the tank 3-drop. I just always felt like the backlash was actually a little bit of a liability, and then it just wasn't really netting me the kind of value that I wanted, even with Spanner. It just wasn't doing what I was hoping to do, which was like, I have to play a 3-drop that they have to clear. and it's kind of annoying for them to deal with, but like actually puts up decent numbers. I think Shootaboy kind of does like a nice Makari impression. And it also plays better in a tempo deck that has a lot of flankers anyway. So Shootaboy, I think, does the Makari impression in the sense that like you could hit their Warlord for 3, right? If there's nothing on the board and you play a Shootaboy, you hit them for 2 with your Warlord, you hit them for an additional 1. So baseline, you're going to play this, you're going to hit for 3. That's kind of like the floor, right? And then they're going to try and clear it. And if they can't, maybe you get that 4 ranged attack and live the dream. And if they clear it, then they clear it and you sort of clean up, but you've gotten maybe a little bit of an advantage. And then the bigger upside to Shootaboy is that you play it alongside flankers where you get like, just a bunch of value kind of out of nowhere. So I will say I'm not terribly convinced that this is, again, I'm kind of bringing this to you after like 2 or 3 days of straight testing. And I think Shootaboy makes a little bit more sense, but I still go back and forth because I also like playing Spanner as just a 3-drop that has upside. So maybe there's a little bit of dyssynergy there that I'm not running the 3-drop tank, but I've just kind of been unimpressed by it, especially in the late game. And Shootaboy I actually think has a little bit more applications as you can like decide when to pull the trigger in the late game and be like, all right, I've got my unit set up. Now I'm going to drop my Shootaboy and hit my opponent for a bunch if I can. Warbikers, bear no explaining, this thing can really just, again, keep you ahead in the life race against Gaskell and just be, for you Magic players out there, a lava axe to the face pretty easily. Tied Up Muscle I'm running as a 1-of. I chose although I think 2 is totally fine, and maybe that's what we should be doing, I actually found that most of the time I was fine on cards, and that 1 Tied Up Muscle was enough. And the 3-drop slot is super, super crowded. So I kind of wanted to keep my curve in mind a little bit with that, because we can sort of play a little bit of the control role, but we're also kind of playing that tempo, like sort of curve out role as well. Whether this is a tempo deck or a mid-range deck, mid-range might be a little bit of a better title. I'm still kind of toying around with it. And because we're playing the Spanner for like value, there's no reason not to run like 1 Burner Boy. This is something that actually BJ, I think, had turned me on to originally when he was testing Gordrang. And I do think that it's worth the value. And I also think if you're not running 2 Spanners and 2 Burner Boys in your Control Gaskell list, you're probably doing it wrong. You get so much value out of it. It's really good in the mirror. It also, people are like, oh, well, I can just play Scarabs into it. You can't really do that if you have Burner Boy and Spanner. So I would recommend that. We're going to run the full heal package with 2 Iron Gob and 2 Scarboy. They are just that good. You do need the healing, especially against Gaskell, if that's what you're seeing the most of, which is what I've been seeing the most of around, anywhere from 3K and up. So definitely be playing those cards. No mucking about. 100% essential. Excellent card. Orc Knob, excellent on curve, excellent late. I will say something that can be pretty scary is setting up an Orc Knob into a Rock Invasion when you're playing Gaskell. Obviously, we don't have Rock Invasion in this deck, and I'm still kind of toying with if that's the right call. But Orc Knob is still just going to be an excellent unit. And I do understand why a lot of the Necron players are like, how is Orc Knob not nerfed? But the Chronomancer was. Because it kind of filled a similar role, except Orc Knob was still cheaper, so therefore kind of inherently better in a lot of ways, and then it lost regeneration, which actually wasn't in the patch notes, so I think Necron players are going to need a nice reinforcement or some love next patch, let's just put it that way. 2 Snaz Wagons, it's just really, really excellent card advantage in a meta that's slow. And at times, if you would say like 1 is maybe enough. I think for Gaskell, definitely 1 is enough because you kind of want to run diverse threats anyway. And for this deck, you kind of like you're trying to like get the most advantage out of your cards because you're not running like that extra cards draw spell in particular. And you're playing a tempo style deck, which really rewards you for having like efficient flankers to kind of answer their steps each turn. And then ideally using your huge Choppa to just be like hitting their face and things like that. So I've been really happy with that. 2 Boss Knob, obviously getting the health when you get to play this. After you have like an Orc Knob that resolved, that it just feels like incredible. Swig Buggy is just such a good flank card. And because I have the defense vehicle that can lower it down to 4, or the defense card rather that lowers the vehicle down by 2, this just card always does work. Same thing with Veteran Stormboy, no question about that. And then here's where there's a little bit of a change, right? You would see a Rock Invasion, you maybe see some other things. I even tried the 8-drop, big kill-a-can thing. But I landed on, obviously Art Shell doesn't really need explaining. Commando. I think this card is good in this meta right now. I think otherwise, probably not. Because the meta's slow, because the meta is kind of, built on like setting up your board and not necessarily like kind of closing the game out like in that turn, right? It's going to require another turn. Can't tell you how many times I played a Commando on like sort of an empty board. I like maybe played a Makari or something else cheap maybe in the late game to try and protect it from no mucking about if I was playing against an Orc player. Commando is scary. The fact that this thing, obviously just if you don't answer it, is hitting something for 7 and then re-stealthing. It's just like a different angle, a different threat that your opponents have to worry about. And I actually got the idea from a player, I don't remember their name, but early in the season, who had played Commando against me, and I was like, oh, I don't like having to deal with this card as I was playing Gaskell at the time. I think this actually earns its keep in the meta currently, and having the perma stealth when it's hitting, or just being able to maybe with a Makari trade with an Ardshell Gurk even, if the card either trades for something big, which is like fine, or it's like going to win the game for you. And I just, it's funny because like when I had first seen this previewed, I was like hoping this would see play, but it didn't really have a slot. But I think in this deck, it's basically fighting for the Rock Invasion slot. And again, I'm not 100% sold that we shouldn't be playing Rock Invasion in this deck. The games go long. Why not play Rock Invasion? The only answer I can tell you because of that is because Rock Invasion is going to come too late against Turvagon, and it's also not going to matter so much against Gaskell because they have Will of Gork. And yes, you can play around it. You can try and bait them out, all this sort of stuff. But I really wanted to try Commando, and so far I've been pretty happy with it. So, we'll see. I think the jury's still out a little bit on this build, but I would definitely recommend trying Commando. That's plenty of me talking about each individual card. Will of Gork bears no explaining as well. So let's just hop into a game, and we'll kind of talk about how the deck operates. Where are we? Turn down. There we go. Against Gen X, who I've definitely played before. So they are on Turvagon potentially this season. Again, I feel like this was a bit of a low roll kind of game for them, but and we're shipping all of this back. We just want to find Makari. Also, all of these come a little bit later. There's just nothing in particular, especially against Turvagon. Don't really need Iron Gob. Don't need Stormboy yet. Don't need Snazwagon. They're not really going to give us stuff to interact with anyway. So we would just be playing them out to curve out as tempo. So we're just going to ship them all back. Let's continue. Okay. So we're not too displeased to see proper Killy. Let me pause here for a second. And I do choose Sweeping Infestation. This is something I actually tried against Swarmlord when I used to play the Uriel matchup, thinking that it was going to help. It actually was just not great. But I think here it makes a lot of sense. Because Gordrang, sorry, wrong war boss there, needs to use Huge Choppa to either hit face or potentially clear a unit. What Infestation allows me to do in this particular matchup against Turvagon that has 40 health is be able to prioritize clearing their board if need be, and they're still going to take damage, right? And I just think Sweeping Infestation actually, in a deck that can turn around and try and kill you at like around 15 life, being given essentially like a free 5 to 6 to 7 damage with you doing essentially nothing but just kind of playing to your strengths with having a lot of flank cards and things like that and keeping the board clear. I think Sweeping Infestation actually makes a ton of sense to pick in this matchup as an offense card or defense card. I can't remember what it is. So yeah, we'll just let it roll here. So we're on the play, so we're always just going to smack away. And being on the play with Gordrang does feel super, super good. So and so they took 4 damage and a fifth off of infestation, right? So we're putting out a ton of pressure. Now this play, I'm sure they had nothing else to do, but this sort of play just didn't really do anything, right? So they're gonna get their ability. But then Venom Thrope, I'm not going to feed Venom Thrope anything, right? So I'm just going to use my ability here to put 4 damage on Venom Thrope so I can just clear it next turn. So we're not developing, which in a lot of ways would feel bad. But again, against this deck, they're not going to be developing either. They're just going to be sitting there kind of adding, Tyranids to their hand and setting up. Although here, they actually have like a reasonable curve. They have their big guy that we're going to have to sink some damage into. Got the Biovore as well. So here it's like pretty easy, just going to finish off the Venom Thrope. And we're going to play the Orc Knob as a tempo play to clear out the Biovore. And then hope that this hits us, which it does end up doing. And all the while they're still taking like damage from the infestation because we're just like clearing board and keeping ourselves lower. And they're still taking 1 to 2 damage or 2 damage every turn cycle. So this is a pretty happy board state for me. They can't clear out the Orc Knob. Anyone knows against Orcs, if an Orc Knob is sticky on the board, it's bad news bears. Because now we're going to play the Boss Knob, and we're going to clear this out because it's got flank. And then we're going to heal our boy to our Orc Knob to probably see another attack after we bash it in face. And they're going to take another damage off the infestation again. So we're definitely just in an optimal position here. We're applying a ton of pressure. We're now officially ahead on life after that attack. Rapacious Hunger here, thankfully doesn't kill our Orc Knob because we got to heal it. And then they heal up, but then they're going to take a damage at the end of their turn. And then here, we're just going to run something out as a tempo play. And I choose not to attack with the Orc Knob here, which is like maybe a little bit greedy. But essentially, I just wanted them to have to use an attack from Tervigon or from something else to clear it, so that the Veteran Stormboy had a better shot of living to see next turn. Because it feels really bad when you run out flank units that just, you play them for tempo and then they just die. It feels awful. But luckily, Tyranids are not really in the market for like removal. So Biomorphologies, they get +2 health to all units. Not a bad one to have. But here we're sitting pretty because this has 0 melee attack, and we're going to be able to clear it very, very easily. And it's here that I'm very happy to see Commando. And this is the kind of board state in a control or meta where like Tervigon could go off by turn 4 or 5 if they had some like weird high roll, right? I mean, or not weird, but a high roll. Most of the time, it seems like Tervigon's going to go. I've played the matchup a couple times. Turn 6, turn 7, right? This is a pretty optimal state. If I play this Commando, right, and they don't have a way to efficiently clear, maybe the Storm Boy in some sort of way, or, and they go off, but I'm able to cobble together, 12 damage between proper kill, huge choppa, and then plus Commando. So 12 plus 7 would be 19, right? They're at 18. And they can't interact with this card. They don't have an ability to do that. So it's going to be really tough for them to deal with Commando. And I think this is like the exact kind of scenario where this card shines, hugely. So they're probably not going to have a great way to clear Storm Boy. Now they've got this Commando that's knocking down their door with the huge knives. And it's here where they go off, right? But the thing is, like, the board's already set. Unless they're playing a Tyrant Guard, right, with Vanguard, which I'll just say now, they don't end up doing. There's just no way for them to live. And, like, this is the kind of, like, tempo orc build that I want to have to punish my opponent for having to wait till turn 7 or turn 8 to set up when I'm just smacking them the whole time, right? And, we're equal on life. They started with 5 life ahead of us. And here they don't have flank for the Mucilid Spore, which wouldn't really do anything anyway. And we have obviously more than lethal here with our huge Choppa and Proper Killy as well. So hit for 7, hit for 6, it's 13, re-stealth, and then smack them with our huge uh, axe saw thing. And, you know, Tyranids and Orcs battle quite a lot, and I think Orcs... It's interesting to me that most people are feeling like Tervagon has the upper hand in the matchup against Gaskell. From a bird's eye view, right, as we close out here, yes, it makes sense, right? Because Tervagon doesn't have to go all in and comboing on one turn. You can spread it out. And so it's really like, do orcs have enough resources to outlast the Tyranid invasion, right, in that matchup? But the thing is that orcs just have very efficient flank cards and very efficient kind of like tempo answers on top of Will of Gork. So it's like you really have to find like these windows to win against orcs, and what really as any faction, and I just think like very good orc players are not going to let you do that, and even if you're playing like really really optimally as Tervagon, it just, to me, especially with all the healing that orcs have too, which they can kind of like be aggressing you and then heal back up, maybe gain some armor off of Scarboy. I do think that Tervagon, isn't aggressing you because they can just set up their board and go crazy. But I just think because Will of Gork is in the game, I don't know. I guess I'm going to have to play the matchup more. And I played against Tyranids quite a few times as Gaskell in particular, and it just felt pretty fine most of the time. Maybe I was getting lucky, but we're not here to talk about Gaskell. People are probably already sick of it. But I think Gore Tempo or Gore Midrange is a nice choice for the meta right now. I do think you have to walk a really fine line in the Gaskell matchup. Gaskell is just pretty scary in the late game if you're spewing resources, because he is going to outvalue you with his ability. And as good as hitting your opponent in the face with a big axe saw is, it doesn't buff all your units in the late game, right? So you do have to play pretty tight with this deck, pretty much in every matchup, but especially the Gaskell matchup. But it's definitely, I think you are favored. And so if you've been kind of bored, if you were like super excited about Gordrang when he was released, and kind of like me, were like, this falls flat, why am I not playing Gaskell? I do think that Gordrang has a nice opportunity to slide in here, and I've actually been seeing it a little bit more on ladder. So I think people are identifying that it's got a pretty solid matchup, I think, into a lot of Tyranids. I even really liked playing this into Sorenlord because of your ability to concuss so often. And I think that we've kind of like identified a lot of these like packages within the orc card pool, and I think I think the build is a bit closer to what it should be. So I had been saying for a while, I don't think we're there yet. I do think Gordrang will probably have its time in the sun. We maybe just don't have the cards or the right build to do it. I feel like we're basically there now. If I can hit a 60% win rate with this deck, which I have so far over the last couple of days of really grinding it out, I think that it's worth trying, especially because it's just well positioned, and it's going to take some time to learn. I'm still not sold on a couple of these slots, but let me know what you think in the comments. Always appreciate the likes and subscribes and all the just all the support that you all give me. So thank you for doing that, and I'm hoping to just keep updating with some videos as much as I can, whenever I can. So thanks for sticking with me. Thanks for tuning in, and I will catch you next time.